All right, so this is the piece of wood that was inside the cabinet for mounting. And so we've got a couple of things that I want to do here before we start looking at where to mount the Pandora's box, the Rygar, and the switcher. I'm hoping I have enough room on here. Obviously, the power supply is going to stay in place, although I do want to kind of see if I can get it down a little tighter because it's a little wobbly. It's a lot tighter just on that one side. Okay, yeah, that's a lot more stable. All right, so this stuff I'm not really clear on. This looks like some sort of power distribution plate. This looks like a transformer. We've got some resistors, but the one thing I know is at no point since I bought this arcade cabinet has any of this actually been wired to anything. So my thought is that this may be part of an old power supply that this superseded. But obviously the machine works without it. So I'm just gonna pull all of it. I don't really see any point in keeping it around. We've got this nice switching power supply. And this will free up a lot of space on the board. Also going to get rid of some of these wire tie downs. At the end of this project, kind of once I'm at least happy with the internals, planning to come back and kind of run my own wire tie downs and kind of lay out a nice clean wiring setup. But I know some people might do it as they go along. I don't really see the point. I mean, I'm switching stuff out all the time. My plans are changing and evolving. You know, for instance, I was not going to have a JAMMA switcher in here. But, you know, it's changed. So, I just think that I don't want to kind of fix things down and then take them out and do that a million different times. So, just gonna let it be until we get towards the end. Okay, so the Rygar board is no joke size-wise. It really takes up quite a bit of this. However, we do have this JAMMA adapter that is using wires, and so it can, it's a little bit of wiggle room, and here we have the switcher. And so what I need to figure out is, what I don't know is which of these, so like This is where my JAMMA harness inside the cabinet will go. And each of these edges is an input, but what I don't know is which is the default input. Because which one's the default input is really going to drive the orientation of this thing. Because I really want the Rygar board to be on the default input. I want this thing to boot up into Rygar, and then the way this works, there's a jumper here to enable it, but if I hit player 1 and player 2 start, it'll switch over to the other JAMMA input. So my thought is Rygar is on the primary input, Pandora's box is on a secondary input. So what I want to do is try to figure out which one of these is the primary input. So give me a sec. All right, so I checked the manual and it looks like this one that's directly across from the main harness is the primary, and this one on the side is the secondary. So the real trick is going to be how these wires here kind of play a role. So if I just get these slotted in, that might be a way to start. Okay, so that looks good. And then how do I get this somewhere so this guy can also sit on it? Over here, we start run into issues of bumping into the power supply. These wires are a little too short. So I think what I have to do here is maybe just install Rygar for now. And then what I can do is get like a JAMMA extension cable and use that to wire in. Could use that to wire in the. Also slide this down a little bit. So the problem is that this JAMMA adapter just doesn't really have a ton of wiggle room in it. It's nice. I'm liking that I got it with the kit. Kind of this is the only way. Like it only bends in one direction, and so putting it down like this is kind of the only way where it sits. So let's. So if I flip the board so that it's at the far edge, nothing's touching. Oh, something's touching. Okay, there's this PCB here. These little strips of wood. One of them is keeping one of the PCBs from. It's like contacting the PCB and keeping the legs from touching the ground, so that's bad. Whew, so how do we want to do this? The other option is to just kind of mount this. So let's go back to the other orientation. Whew. So the other idea would be just to mount this like this, and then run a JAMMA extender off of it, and theoretically you could even just mount the box up here. So the problem is, I have to figure out if there's any more room in the cabinet. Give me a sec to go take a measurement. So I wanted to double check. So we've got about 2 or 3 inches of room between the length of this board and the actual depth of the cabinet. So we could mount this in such a way that the Pandora's box sits over the edge. Because the nice thing is the Pandora's box, it's small, it's light. If I were to just get some VHB tape and get this all kind of mounted down in this little section of the board down here. So if I get some VHB tape and just mount it down here, I'm actually pretty confident that the weight won't be too crazy. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. So first thing I'm gonna do is take one of these screws that was holding in the Pandora's box, and I am going to screw down just the 2 corners of this PCB. I'm trying not to over tighten here because these little standoffs, their feet are just plastic. They're nothing super sturdy, so I don't really want to over tighten here. Okay. And so even with just the 2, this is in pretty good shape. So I think what I'll do is I'll be back in a moment. I'm going to get some VHB tape. And the one thing I want to do is I want to avoid... So this should be pretty straightforward. Again, just going to avoid this badge. Pull it up a little bit. Just come through here with a Lysol wipe and just kind of wipe down any kind of dirt or dust, because the VHB tape is really strong but doesn't stick nearly as well when there's dirt. As you can see, pulled plenty of dirt and grunge off of that piece of wood. But basically it's just super, this is like the industrial version of, if you've ever had like the command strips, this is basically like the industrial version of that. It's that foam, double-sided sticky tape. So it's really great for projects like this. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, while that dries, we want this board to have it, and so we want it up to about here maybe, to keep it nice and away from that sticker. So I'm just gonna roll a little bit out here, grab my scissors, snip it, and just give it a nice firm pressure across, make sure it sticks really good. All right. And then I think we're just going to peel the back. It's always the hard part because I'm a fingernail biter, so I usually don't have good fingernails to peel these things, but that was relatively easy. And I'm just going to bring this down here and just firmly press it in place. Now the tag is under the Pandora's box, but it's not under the part where I put the VHB. So in the future we go to remove the Pandora's box, you're not going to have any issues. All right, so I think that's about it. That's pretty good on there. I'm gonna take this kind of sandwiched. Oh no, okay. It did not like the VHB. Okay. Can we get one screw hole over the board? So, I think the problem is the particle board. Like, it's old, it's falling apart, it's kind of naturally dusty. So what are we gonna do to get this thing kinda, I think it's fine if it sticks down like this. I just gotta, the screw holes are both past the edge of the board. Could I do it like this? Yeah, I could probably do that. Might reuse one of those screws I said I didn't want to reuse, but it's just one. But I think, so this screw hole here would be on the board. This would kind of be off in space, but it would be, you know, free space that there isn't, as far as I know, we've got a couple of inches there. So, I mean, worst comes to worst, I go to put this thing in, it doesn't fit, and there's another section of this video with plan B. But for right now, let's give this a shot. Actually, I don't need it. Well, I couldn't get them both mounted, so I decided to just go with the Rygar board, and I ordered a JAMMA extension, and we'll use that to get the Pandora's box in there. But I really wanted to get this installed. It looks great. I'll try to coin it up. Nice. If I can play poorly, but one hand. Nice. Right. Well, I'll put a little update on the end of this once that extension arrives. Well, this is the JAMMA harness, and there's one small problem. Let's see. There we go. Ooh. All the writing is in Chinese on, and then this PCB part has no writing. So let me refer back to the JAMMA spec to figure out which side is the part side and which side is the solder side. Apologies for the change in audio quality. I had purchased a lavalier mic, but the tripod decided to take a little spill, and the connector for the lavalier mic went with it. So I think that, given how all of this stuff is wired, hopefully you can see over here. So you see those big fat wires? Those are carrying actual voltage. Everything else is just, you know, buttons and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure if we just line those up between the sides, it should be pretty good. So let me give it a try, and we'll see how it works. Now, before I do that, almost forgot, let's attach the JAMMA board. So my understanding, based on the reading of the documentation, is that the one, so that this will plug in here. I think that's good. And that basically this edge up here obviously connects to the JAMMA harness for the cabinet, and then this one down here that's directly across from it should be what it boots to. So the goal here being that it will boot to this one, which will be hooked up to the Rygar, and then only if we switch it will it go to the Pandora's box. So let me get it wired up and we'll see if I'm right. Lesson learned. I could have sworn it said 22 inch, but certainly not 22 inches. And anytime I try to connect it, it's pulling pretty severely. So I need to find somewhere else to mount the Pandora's box. So I think I'm going to investigate a couple of options off camera and we'll see what I come up with. Alright, so the board is up here near the front of Pandora's box. And then we've got the Rygar back here. Rygar's running an extension up to the JAMMA switcher there. So the only concern here is that Rygar is on the secondary, not the primary. But what I want to do is try to boot it up. And then from there we can see whether that works as I thought, whether it saves the last one on when it's switched off. And then we can go from there. Oh, moment of truth. Let's see. Does it boot the Pandora's box or does it boot the Rygar? Oh, let's turn the volume pot down because I really don't know where this thing's at. Whew. And as you can see inside, this thing is still just a mess of wires. That's partially just because I'm experimenting. Once I feel like the inside kind of electronics are in a better place, we'll solidify that. Put zip ties on things, tie them down. All right, so we're on the Pandora's box as I expected. Now we hit player 1 and player 2 start. Huh. So Rygar is there, but it's a little wonky. Let's see. So we're on Rygar. What happens if I turn it off and turn it back on? Nothing. Oh wait. This might be the Pandora box. Yep, that's the Pandora's box boot sequence. Okay, so it does go back to the primary. Alright, let me turn this off. See if I can figure out why Rygar is so wobbly. Alright, I went inside and the extension cable wasn't really fully seated into the Rygar JAMMA adapter. So let's let the Pandora's box boot up. Okay. Still a wobbly mess. Oh, let me readjust things one more time. Now, this is using this kind of cheap JAMMA extension harness that I found on Amazon. Clearly manufactured in China. Dubious quality. So let me tinker with it, see if I can find a fix. If not, we might just need a different extension cord for the JAMMA. And that might be for the best anyway. I really don't love the Pandora's box being the primary. So what I'm thinking is, if I mount the switcher with some posts, and then I get two extensions. They're both running in their V extensions. It's a lot of cables to manage, but it should let me kind of run either one, whichever way I want it. The problem is right now, I have the switcher plugged kind of directly in to the Pandora's box, which means that I'm pretty limited on how I can orient it because the Pandora's box is really close to the front of the cabinet. So let me turn this off, fiddle with it a little bit more, see where we get. So the JAMMA switch is kind of dangling loose in there for right now. Like I said, a second extension might help. But what I realized was that there was still a little bit of a loose connection going on. So Rygar. Pandora's box will come up here any minute. Takes a little bit longer to boot than Rygar. I believe power is going to both of these equally. Huh. That's interesting. Now the Pandora's box is on the other side. Connected via the extension cable, doesn't want to go. Well, I think that confirms it. The extension cable that I ordered is no bueno. This is Rygar plugged into the switcher board, but with no extension cable. And I had Pandoras on there through the extension cable, and it was all wonky. So I think that the issue here is with the extension cable. So we will have to order a new extension cable and give it a shot then. So in this episode, I learned that cheap parts are cheap. It's an expensive cabinet. There's really no reason to go with the cheap stuff, and a lot of times it doesn't work. The other thing is, honestly, I realized that once you're inside the cabinet, you definitely don't have as much room as you think. Particularly on this cabinet with the monitor, add an angle so it comes down low, takes up a lot of room. But just generally, once you start putting the board in, the board's pretty big. There's not a ton of extra room, and you have to really kind of plan out your layout a little bit in advance. And the last one is that real boards, even though, this one's a bootleg, but it's way better than emulation. Honestly, at least the Pandora's box was, I was struggling. I couldn't really get past the first level of Rygar. And once I put the new board in and the new controls, it was much smoother. I was pretty consistently getting to like the third or fourth level on just 1/4. And it's awesome. So I think those are my takeaways for this episode. Please like and subscribe. We've got a lot more coming. Up next, I think we're going to start working on some art that just arrived in, and we're going to get going on installing it. All right. Thanks. See y'all next time.